Lena had always been the kind of person who moved through the world quietly. She worked at a well-known restaurant in the city, a place where rich people came to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, and business victories. The restaurant itself was elegant, with polished wooden floors, soft lighting, and a grand piano that sat in the corner of the dining hall. Most people hardly noticed it, except when a pianist played on special evenings. But to Lena, the piano had always been something magical. She had grown up near one, learning music from her mother, who had once dreamed of being a professional pianist. Her days at the restaurant were long and tiring. She moved gracefully between tables, balancing plates and glasses, smiling politely at guests who often treated her like she was invisible. Many of them assumed that because she wore a simple uniform and carried orders, she had nothing remarkable about her. Lena didn't mind. She liked her work, even if it didn't earn her applause or recognition. There was a calm pride in doing her job well, in being efficient and careful, and in bringing a moment of happiness to strangers through her service. It was a typical Thursday afternoon when the restaurant began to fill up for a special event. A large private dinner had been arranged in one of the main halls, and the energy in the place was different from usual. The air was filled with the scent of polished wood, fresh flowers, and carefully cooked food. Guests were arriving, dressed in elegant clothes, their conversations a mix of polite greetings and soft laughter. Lena moved among them, taking orders and refilling glasses, her mind always alert, her hands steady. She noticed a man who seemed different from the rest. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and had an air of authority. People around him were clearly attentive, laughing at his jokes and hanging on his every word. Lena watched quietly from a distance, curious but careful not to attract attention. She had learned over the years that the less the wealthy noticed her, the smoother her work went. It was easier to blend into the background and do her job without interference. The piano in the corner of the hall caught her eye as she moved past it. Even from a distance, she could see its polished surface and the elegance of its design. She had never played in public, not since she was a child, but the sight of the instrument always stirred something inside her. It was a memory of evenings at home, of music that had the power to change moods, to express what words could not. Lena sometimes dreamed of playing in front of an audience, not for fame or applause, but simply to share the joy she felt when her fingers touched the key's dot as the guests settled into their seats. Lena continued her rounds, serving drinks and ensuring every table had what it needed. She noticed how different the wealthy could be when they were together. Some were kind, polite, even generous, while others were loud, arrogant, and quick to judge anyone they considered beneath them. Lena had learned to navigate both types with a calm smile and careful steps. She had her own way of surviving in this world, without making waves. The man she had noticed earlier seemed to be the center of attention now. His laughter was louder, more commanding, and people around him seemed eager to impress him. Lena carried a tray of drinks near his table, her eyes catching a flash of movement from him. He had turned his gaze toward the piano, and then, unexpectedly, toward her. She froze for a moment, unsure if he had actually noticed her, or if it was just her imagination. He motioned for her to come closer, and Lena hesitated. It was unusual for a guest to address a server in such a direct way, especially in front of others. But she approached, her steps careful and deliberate, keeping her composure, even though her heart was beating faster than usual. He smiled, a sharp, knowing smile that made her feel small, almost as if he was testing her. "Can you play that?" "Piano?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly across the table. There was a hint of amusement in his tone, as if he found the idea funny. Lena looked at the piano, then back at him, unsure of what to say. She had not played in years, and certainly not in front of strangers, especially not this type of audience. But she had learned to answer politely, to keep things simple and professional. I used to play," she said softly, keeping her gaze lowered. The guests around the table laughed lightly, not cruelly, but enough to make Lena feel the eyes of the room on her. She could sense the man's amusement growing, as if he was already picturing a small, shy waitress trying to make music for people who expected only entertainment. "You play this piano?" he asked, incredulously. His laughter was contagious, and the guests around him joined in. Lena felt a knot in her stomach, a mix of embarrassment and anxiety. But beneath it, there was a spark of something else, a quiet determination. She had played for herself many times, and she knew she could still do it. The question was whether she would allow herself to face this moment. The man leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the attention he was getting. "Come on, then," he said. "Play something for us. Let's see what you've got." The room seemed to hold its breath. Lena looked at the piano again, the smooth, polished keys calling to her, reminding her of years of practice and the joy she had found in music. She knew that whatever happened next, she had to be calm and focused. Taking a deep breath, Lena walked toward the piano. The floor felt slightly slippery beneath her shoes, but she moved steadily, placing her hands on the keys as she had done countless times before in the privacy of her home. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the familiar feeling of the keys under her fingers bring her a sense of comfort. The room was quiet now, the guests curious, some smiling politely, others whispering to each other. The man's expression had changed slightly. He was still confident, but there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. When she began to play, it was soft at first, almost tentative, as if testing the waters. The melody flowed gently, filling the corners of the room with a calm and unexpected beauty. Conversations stopped completely. Some guests leaned forward, in their seats, surprised by the skill and emotion emanating from the small figure at the piano. Lena's fingers moved naturally, each note carrying a piece of her heart, each chord expressing something words never could. The man's laughter faded as he listened. His guests looked at him, then at Lena, and for the first time, the dynamic of the room shifted. It was no longer about wealth or status, but about the music, about the talent of someone who had been invisible for so long. Lena didn't notice the change in the room. She was lost in the music, in the joy and freedom it gave her. Every key she pressed was a statement, a reminder that she was more than what people saw on the surface. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat, and then erupted into applause. People stood, clapped, and even some wiped tears from their eyes. The man who had tried to humiliate her looked shocked, unsure how to react. Lena felt a strange mixture of relief, pride, and disbelief. She had faced the moment she had never expected, and in doing so, had revealed a part of herself that no one in the room had ever imagined. As she stood and took a small bow, Lena realized something important. She had always known her talent, but now the world knew it too. And in that recognition, she felt a new sense of confidence, a spark that told her she could face challenges, no matter how daunting, and come out stronger. She returned to her duties, serving tables as before, but with a quiet smile that reflected the knowledge that she had touched the hearts of everyone present, without even trying to impress, simply by being herself and playing the music she loved. The day continued, the guests eventually leaving, some stopping to offer kind words and congratulations. Lena moved through the restaurant, carrying plates and drinks, but inside, she felt lighter, freer, and more alive than ever before. She knew that this was only the beginning, that her music could take her places she had only dreamed of. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that her quiet, hidden talent could shine in the world, and that she was capable of surprising even the most skeptical of people. The next morning, Lena arrived at the restaurant early, as she always did. The sun had just started to rise, casting a warm glow over the quiet streets. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar smell of polished wood and flowers greeting her. The day felt different somehow, lighter. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened the night before. The memory of the guests' applause, the surprised faces, and the man who had tried to embarrass her lingered in her mind, as she prepared for the day. Arranging the tables and checking the silverware, her thoughts kept returning to the piano. She had played in front of strangers, and had not only survived the moment, but had also captivated everyone. It was a strange feeling, a mix of excitement and disbelief. She had always known her talent, but seeing it recognized, even briefly, was something entirely new. The restaurant slowly began to fill with the usual morning crowd. Some regulars waved at her, greeting her warmly. Lena smiled back politely, trying to maintain her calm, professional demeanor. She noticed a few of the staff whispering quietly, glancing in her direction with smiles that carried admiration and surprise. It seemed the story of her performance had spread quickly within the restaurant walls. During the morning rush, Lena moved efficiently between tables, taking orders and delivering food, her mind still partly on the previous evening. She had to remind herself to focus on her work, to stay grounded. The restaurant could be a chaotic place, and losing focus, even for a moment, could lead to mistakes. Yet every time she passed the piano in the corner, she felt a familiar thrill, a small rush of energy that reminded her of the music she loved as the afternoon approached. The restaurant began preparing for another private event. Lena overheard the manager talking to the staff about the arrangements, making sure every detail was perfect. She stayed busy, cleaning, organizing, and checking that everything was in order. Despite her usual diligence, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. By mid-afternoon, the guests began arriving. Lena noticed them immediately. They were dressed in fine clothes, carrying themselves with confidence and authority. Among them was the man from the previous night. He had returned, accompanied by a few new people. Lena's heart sank slightly. She wasn't sure why he was back or what he intended to do. She reminded herself to stay calm and professional, focusing on her responsibilities rather than her anxiety. The man's eyes met hers briefly, and Lena felt the familiar sharpness of his gaze. He smiled, a small knowing smile, and Lena understood that he had remembered her performance. She quickly averted her eyes and went about her duties, serving drinks and checking on the other tables. The tension in the air was palpable, but Lena refused to let it overwhelm her. As the evening progressed, Lena moved through the dining hall, ensuring that every guest had what they needed. She noticed how the man watched her from across the room, occasionally whispering to his companions and gesturing subtly toward the piano. Lena tried not to let his attention distract her. She had learned over the years to navigate situations where powerful people tried to assert control. She knew she had to remain composed and professional, no matter what. At one point, the man called her over to his table again. Lena approached cautiously, her hands steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. He looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and amusement, his eyes sharp and calculating. "Do you remember yesterday?" he asked, his tone casual, but carrying an undercurrent of challenge. Lena nodded silently, unsure of how he would continue. "Do you really think you can do it again?" he asked, gesturing toward the piano. The room seemed to quiet as other guests listened in. Lena felt the weight of their attention, the collective curiosity of the room pressing down on her. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had already faced this moment once and had succeeded. "Yes," she said softly, her voice steady. "I can play." Her words were simple, but there was a quiet determination behind them that surprised even herself. The man's expression shifted slightly, his amusement mixed now with a hint of intrigue. He had expected fear or hesitation, but Lena's calm response challenged his assumptions. "Very well," he said finally, gesturing toward the piano. "Show us what you've got." The room held its breath, anticipation and curiosity mingling in the air. Lena walked toward the piano, each step measured and deliberate. She could feel the eyes of the guests on her, some filled with expectation, others with skepticism. She allowed herself to remember the joy of playing, the way her fingers moved naturally over the keys, the way music could communicate what words could not dot. As she sat down at the piano, Lena closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only her and the instrument. She began to play, softly at first, testing the melody, feeling the rhythm, and letting the music flow through her. The guests were immediately drawn in, the room transforming as the sound of the piano filled every corner. Lena's fingers moved with confidence and grace, each note carrying emotion and depth that captivated everyone present. The man who had tried to humiliate her the night before watched in silence. His companions were equally quiet, their initial amusement replaced by surprise and admiration. Lena felt the energy of the room shift, the focus moving from him to her, from power and status to talent and expression. She played with a passion she hadn't realized she still possessed, each chord a statement of who she was, a reminder that she was more than her job or appearance. By the time she finished, the room was again silent for a heartbeat before erupting into applause. Guests stood, clapping and cheering, some even leaning forward to express their astonishment and admiration. Lena took a small bow, her heart swelling with a mix of pride, relief, and joy. She had faced the challenge again, and once more had transformed the moment with her music. The man who had tried to embarrass her looked stunned. He had underestimated her talent, and the reality of her skill had left him momentarily speechless. Lena returned to her duties, moving through the restaurant with a quiet confidence she had not felt before. She served tables, refilled glasses, and ensured everything was in order, but inside, she carried a newfound sense of empowerment. After the event ended and the guests left, Lena stayed behind to clean up, reflecting on the day. She realized that her talent was not just a private joy, but a force that could inspire, surprise, and change perceptions. She thought about the man's reaction, about how quickly people's assumptions could be overturned by something as simple and profound as music. Lena felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that she had remained true to herself and had shared a part of her soul with the world. As she closed the restaurant for the night, Lena allowed herself a small smile. She had faced challenges, endured scrutiny, and emerged stronger and more confident. The piano in the corner seemed to glisten in the dim light, a silent companion to her journey. She knew that her life was beginning to change, that opportunities and experiences she had only dreamed of were now within reach. And with that thought, Lena left the restaurant, stepping out into the quiet streets with a sense of hope, purpose, and the unshakable knowledge that her music could touch hearts and transform moments in ways she had never imagined. The following week, the restaurant seemed busier than ever. Word of Lena's piano performance had spread, and now many guests seemed curious to see the waitress who could play like that. Some came specifically because they had heard stories from friends or read about it online. Lena noticed the change immediately, as more people paused to look at her, whispering and smiling when they recognized her from previous visits. Lena continued her work with the same diligence she had always shown, moving between tables with calm efficiency. The restaurant staff began giving her knowing smiles, and a few even congratulated her quietly, happy for her success. Lena felt a strange mixture of pride and apprehension. She had always enjoyed her work quietly, without attention, but now she realized that she could no longer remain invisible. People expected more from her now, and that brought a new kind of pressure. As she moved past the piano, she noticed it gleaming under the restaurant lights. She hadn't planned to play that day, but the instrument seemed to call to her again. She remembered the first time she had faced the audience, the nerves, the fear, and then the joy of sharing something deeply personal. Lena had always loved music, but she had never imagined how powerful it could feel to play in front of others. To command attention without saying a word. Around mid-afternoon, the man who had first challenged her returned. He arrived alone this time, his expression calm, but with a hint of curiosity. Lena noticed him immediately, feeling a familiar tension in her chest. She reminded herself to stay focused on her work, not to let his presence intimidate her. But as she carried drinks to his table, she could sense his gaze following her every move. His eyes sharp and calculating. He called her over once again, and Lena approached, her steps measured and deliberate. The room seemed to quiet, as though everyone sensed the significance of the moment. The man's tone was casual, but his words carried an unspoken challenge. "I've been thinking about your performance," he said. "I didn't expect that. Do you think you could play something more complex?" Lena paused, considering her response. The challenge was clear, but she also felt a quiet determination. She had faced his amusement before and had turned it into an opportunity. Perhaps she could do it again. "I can try," she said simply, keeping her voice steady. The man's eyebrows raised slightly, and the room held its breath. Guests at nearby tables whispered among themselves, curious to see what would happen. Lena walked to the piano once more, the polished keys gleaming beneath her fingers. She took a deep breath, letting the familiar sensation of the keys under her hands bring her a sense of calm. As she began to play, the music flowed naturally, intricate yet beautiful, full of emotion and depth. Each note told a story, each chord carried meaning. The guests were captivated, leaning forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on her. Lena felt the energy of the room shift, the focus moving entirely to the music and the skill with which she played. She lost herself in the melody, feeling the joy and freedom that came with expressing herself fully through the piano. The man watched in silence, his initial amusement replaced by surprise and respect. He had expected hesitation, perhaps even failure, but Lena's performance was confident, precise, and mesmerizing. The complexity of the piece, the emotion she conveyed, and the ease with which she played all combined to create a moment that held everyone's attention. As the music continued, Lena felt a growing sense of connection with the audience. She could sense their admiration, their awe, and even their disbelief at the talent of someone they had underestimated so easily. It was a strange and wonderful feeling to be seen and appreciated, not for her job or appearance, but for something she loved and had nurtured for years. When the final note lingered in the air, the room erupted into applause once again. This time, the reaction was even more enthusiastic than before. Guests clapped, cheered, and some even stood to show their admiration. Lena took a small bow, a shy smile on her face, but her heart was full of pride and satisfaction. She had faced the challenge, played with her whole heart, and left a lasting impression. Afterward, as she returned to her duties, she noticed the man watching her carefully. He no longer seemed amused or critical. There was now a hint of respect in his eyes. Lena focused on serving the tables, but she couldn't ignore the subtle shift in the atmosphere. The power dynamic had changed. She had faced someone who had sought to humiliate her and had turned the moment into one of recognition and respect. Throughout the evening, guests continued to praise her, offering compliments and expressing admiration for her skill. Some even asked if she would perform again, intrigued and inspired by her talent. Lena felt a sense of validation, a recognition that her music could truly touch people, that it could communicate in ways words often could not. By the time the restaurant quieted down, Lena was exhausted but exhilarated. She had faced another challenge, met it with courage, and had once again transformed an uncomfortable situation into an opportunity to shine. She reflected on the past week, on the journey from quiet, unnoticed waitress to someone whose talent could captivate an audience. The experience had changed her, giving her a new sense of confidence and purpose. As she closed the restaurant that night, Lena allowed herself a quiet moment to savor the day. She thought about the piano, the music, and the power it held. She realized that her talent was not just a personal joy, but a gift that could inspire and move others. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to share it, and a growing determination to continue exploring what she could achieve. Walking home through the quiet streets, Lena felt a sense of possibility she had never experienced before. The world seemed wider, filled with opportunities she had not dared to imagine. She knew that the journey was just beginning, that there would be more challenges, more moments where her courage and skill would be tested. But she also knew that she had the strength and talent to face them, to turn moments of doubt or ridicule into moments of triumph and recognition. That night, as she lay in bed, Lena thought about the piano and the music that had always been a part of her life. She realized that her journey was not just about performing for others, but about embracing who she was, celebrating her talent, and allowing herself to be seen and heard. The experience had taught her that courage, confidence, and passion could transform even the most unexpected moments, and that sometimes the very things that made us vulnerable could become our greatest strengths. The restaurant buzzed with energy that evening, more than Lena had ever seen. The piano in the corner seemed almost alive under the warm lights, waiting for someone to bring it to life. Lena moved through the hall with her usual calm, serving guests efficiently, yet she could feel the tension and curiosity in the room. Word of her previous performances had spread, and now people watched her closely, some openly anticipating what might happen. The atmosphere was electric, charged with expectation. As she cleared a table, she noticed the man who had challenged her twice before entering again, this time accompanied by a group of high-profile guests. They all looked around the room, their eyes eventually settling on her. Lena felt a familiar nervousness, a mixture of anticipation and caution. She reminded herself to stay focused on her work, but she couldn't deny the flutter of excitement in her chest. Something about tonight felt different, more important than ever. He motioned for her to come closer, and Lena approached, her steps measured and calm. His gaze was sharp, evaluating her, waiting for her to respond. The guests around the table were silent, curious about what was about to happen. Lena felt the weight of their attention, but also a sense of quiet determination. She had faced challenges before, turned moments of humiliation into triumph, and tonight was another opportunity. "Can you play something that will truly impress?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly, with a slight challenge embedded in the words. Lena nodded, her hands brushing over the tray she carried, steadying herself. She placed it down and walked toward the piano, every eye in the room now on her. The polished keys gleamed under the lights, inviting her to bring them to life. As she seated herself, Lena took a deep breath, letting the memory of her previous performances give her strength. She let her fingers hover above the keys, feeling the familiar texture, the smoothness, the promise of sound. She closed her eyes. For a moment, centering herself, letting go of the nervous energy and embracing the joy of music. Her mind was quiet, focused solely on the melody that was about to flow through her. When she began to play, the room fell into a hushed silence. The melody was soft at first, delicate, drawing the guests in gradually. Then it grew, weaving through. Complex harmonies, each note carrying emotion, depth, and subtle power. Lena played with a confidence she hadn't felt before, letting the music speak for her. She was no longer a shy waitress. She was a storyteller, a conduit of emotion and expression through her instrument. The guests leaned forward, captivated by the beauty and intricacy of her performance. Some whispered quietly to each other, unable to hide their astonishment. The man who had challenged her watched closely, a mixture of surprise and respect on his face. He had underestimated her again, and now it was clear that her talent went far beyond what anyone had imagined. Lena felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of triumph that was deeply personal and profoundly moving. As the music continued, Lena felt a connection with everyone in the room. The sounds she produced seemed to fill the space, reaching each person, individually stirring emotions they hadn't expected to feel. Some guests had tears in their eyes, others smiled softly, touched by the beauty and power of her playing. Lena herself was lost in the music, her heart and soul intertwined with each note, each chord resonating with passion and authenticity. Midway through the piece, Lena added a delicate flourish, a series of complex sequences that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth. The room was completely still, all attention focused on her. The man's initial arrogance had completely vanished, replaced by admiration and curiosity. He could no longer see her as just a waitress. She had transcended that role, showing a talent and presence that demanded respect. By the time she reached the final notes, the energy in the room had transformed. The guests were no longer simply observers. They were participants in the moment, carried along by the music, moved in ways they hadn't anticipated. The last note lingered in the air, a soft echo that seemed to hang between everyone present, and then the room erupted into applause. The sound was loud, enthusiastic, and genuine. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and some even expressing verbal admiration, unable to contain their amazement. Lena took a small bow, a shy smile on her face, but inside she felt a surge of pride and fulfillment. She had faced the challenge, played from the heart, and created a moment that none in the room would forget. The man who had tried to humiliate her watched quietly, now fully aware that his assumptions had been wrong. He no longer seemed threatening or superior. He seemed genuinely impressed, even humbled. Returning to her duties, Lena moved through the restaurant with a new sense of confidence. She refilled glasses, cleared plates, and checked on the guests, all while carrying the quiet glow of accomplishment. The staff whispered among themselves, smiles spreading across their faces, sharing in her triumph without saying a word. The restaurant felt warmer somehow, filled not just with elegant decor and fine food, but with the lingering magic of music and talent. Throughout the evening, many guests approached her with compliments and questions. Some asked when she might perform again. Others expressed amazement at her skill. Lena responded politely, grateful for their kind words. Yet she felt an inner satisfaction that went beyond recognition. She had transformed her fear and hesitation into a moment of pure expression, and the impact it had made on the room was deeply fulfilling. As the night drew to a close and the last guests departed, Lena took a moment to sit by the piano, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. She thought about the journey she had been on, the challenges she had faced, and the ways in which her music had changed not only how others saw her, but how she saw herself. The piano, once just a beautiful object in the corner of a room, had become a companion, a channel through which she could express herself and connect with others. Locking up the restaurant later that night, Lena walked home through quiet streets, reflecting on the evening's events. She felt a sense of possibility, a realization that her talent was not confined to her private world, but could touch others, inspire, and even change perceptions. She thought about the man, about the guests, and about the subtle ways in which assumptions could be overturned by authenticity and skill. That night, as she lay in bed, Lena's thoughts lingered on the piano, on the music that had always been a part of her life, and on the journey she was beginning to understand was hers to embrace. She realized that each performance, each moment of courage, was a step toward becoming the person she had always known she could be. And as sleep finally claimed her, she dreamed not just of music, but of possibility, confidence, and the quiet power of talent revealed at just the right moment. The following evening, the restaurant was packed once again, with more guests than Lena had ever seen. There was a sense of excitement in the air, a buzz that seemed to swirl around the tables and chairs. People whispered among themselves, some curious, some excited, all eager to see the waitress who had captured the hearts of everyone with her piano performance. Lena moved quietly through the hall, refilling glasses, clearing plates, and attending to guests with the same steady grace she had always shown. Yet tonight felt different. There was a sense of anticipation that hung over the room, a collective expectation that made her pulse quicken. The piano in the corner caught her eye as she passed by. Its polished black surface gleamed under the soft lighting, as if inviting her to play. Lena had not planned to perform tonight, but the energy in the room seemed to call to her. She felt a familiar thrill, a quiet stirring of excitement that she had experienced before. Music had always been a refuge, a way to express emotions she could not put into words. And tonight, it felt as though the restaurant itself wanted her to bring it to life. The man who had challenged her before entered again, this time accompanied by several influential guests. Their eyes scanned the room, settling eventually on Lena. She felt a wave of nervousness, tempered by a growing determination. She had faced his challenges before, turned moments of potential humiliation into opportunities, and tonight would be no different. Lena reminded herself to stay calm, focused on the music, and to trust in her skill. He called her over to his table, and she approached with careful steps. The guests around them fell silent, curious about what was going to happen. Lena felt the weight of their attention, but instead of fear, she allowed herself to feel a sense of quiet confidence. She had faced scrutiny before, and had emerged with her talent recognized and respected. This time, she would do the same. "Can you play for us tonight?" he asked, his tone casual, but with an unmistakable challenge embedded in it. Lena nodded, her fingers brushing over the tray she carried, steadying herself. "Yes, I can," she said simply, her voice calm and confident. The man's eyebrows rose slightly, and the guests around the table leaned forward, anticipating what would come next. Lena placed the tray down and walked to the piano, the polished keys glinting beneath the light's dot as she seated herself. Lena closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. She let go of any lingering nerves, allowing her love for music to guide her fingers. When she began to play, the room fell silent, every ear tuned to the melody she produced. The music started softly, delicate and tender, then gradually built in complexity and emotion. Lena poured her heart into every note, expressing feelings she had carried for years, her fingers moving with grace, precision, and passion. The guests were captivated. Some leaned forward, mesmerized by the skill and emotion in her playing. Others whispered quietly to each other, amazed at the talent they had underestimated. The man who had challenged her watched in silence, his usual confidence replaced by surprise and respect. Lena's performance held a quiet power, drawing the room into a world of music where rank, wealth, and status were irrelevant. It was simply about the connection created through sound, emotion, and skill. As the piece progressed, Lena added subtle flourishes, complex sequences that showcased her mastery without overwhelming the emotion of the melody. Each chord, each note, was carefully chosen to convey depth and feeling. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, the audience completely absorbed in the performance. Lena herself felt a sense of freedom, a joy that came from expressing herself fully, unafraid of judgment or expectation. She was not performing to impress. She was sharing a part of herself, allowing the music to speak for her. Midway through the performance, Lena noticed the guests' reactions more closely. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the beauty and emotion she conveyed. Others smiled softly, caught in the magic of the moment. Even the man who had tried to humiliate her before seemed transformed. His expression softened, and for the first time, Lena saw genuine admiration and perhaps even a hint of humility in his gaze. She continued to play, pouring herself completely into the music, each note a reflection of courage, confidence, and authenticity. As the final notes lingered in the air, the room erupted into applause. The sound was enthusiastic and heartfelt, a chorus of appreciation that filled the hall. Guests rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, expressing amazement and admiration for the performance. Lena took a small bow, her heart swelling with pride and fulfillment. She had faced the challenge, played from her heart, and created a moment that would be remembered by everyone present. Returning to her duties, Lena moved through the restaurant with a quiet sense of accomplishment. She refilled glasses, cleared plates, and ensured the guests were comfortable, all while carrying the satisfaction of knowing she had touched hearts and minds. The staff whispered among themselves, sharing smiles and congratulations, silently celebrating her success alongside her. The atmosphere in the restaurant had transformed, filled not just with elegant decor and fine food, but with the lingering magic of music and talent revealed. Throughout the evening, guests approached her with compliments and expressions of admiration. Some asked when she might perform again. Others praised the depth and emotion of her playing. Lena responded politely, grateful for their kind words, but she also felt a deeper satisfaction that went beyond recognition. She had shared a part of herself, her music, and the response had been genuine and heartfelt. She realized that her talent could not only entertain, but also inspire, uplift, and create connections that transcended social boundaries. As the night drew to a close and the last guests departed, Lena took a quiet moment by the piano. Her fingers rested lightly on the keys, feeling the familiar texture and the lingering energy of the evening. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the challenges she had faced, the moments of doubt, and the triumphs that had followed. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a companion, a channel through which she could express herself fully and connect with others in ways she had never imagined. Walking home later that night, Lena felt a sense of possibility and excitement for the future. She realized that her talent was not confined to the restaurant or private moments, but could reach out and touch others, inspire them, and even transform perceptions. She thought about the man, about the guests, and about how assumptions and prejudices could be overturned by skill, authenticity, and courage. Each performance was a testament to her growth, her strength, and her ability to face challenges with grace. That night, as she lay in bed, Lena's mind was filled with the melodies she had played, the emotions she had shared, and the reactions of the audience. She understood that her journey was just beginning, that there were more moments to face, more opportunities to share her talent, and more chances to grow and inspire. The piano, once a quiet presence in the corner of the restaurant, had become a symbol of her potential, her voice, and her courage. And as sleep finally claimed her, she dreamed not only of music, but of the possibilities, confidence, and quiet power that came from embracing who she truly was. The restaurant felt unusually quiet that afternoon, a calm that came after a series of busy and exciting nights. Lena arrived early, carrying her bag and adjusting her uniform, the familiar routine offering a sense of comfort. The grand piano in the corner caught her eye immediately, gleaming in the soft light. It had witnessed her journey over the past days, from quiet, unnoticed waitress to someone whose music captivated every guest. Lena took a deep breath, feeling both a sense of nostalgia and anticipation. She knew tonight would be different, that it could mark a turning point not just for the restaurant, but for her own life. The day passed in a familiar rhythm. Lena moved gracefully between tables, taking orders, refilling drinks, and ensuring guests were comfortable. She smiled politely at regulars, exchanged brief pleasantries with new guests, and navigated the hallways and corners with practiced ease. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a quiet excitement. She could sense that tonight, the piano might again become the focal point, the instrument through which her talent and courage would shine. As the evening approached, a group of well-dressed guests entered the restaurant. They were curious, polite, and observant, clearly aware of the stories surrounding Lena's previous performances. Among them was the man who had first tried to humiliate her, now accompanied by people who seemed eager to witness her play. Lena noticed their attention immediately, a mixture of nervousness and determination stirring within her. She reminded herself to stay calm, focus on her work, and trust in her skill and experience. He called her over, and Lena approached, keeping her posture steady and her expression neutral. The guests fell silent, sensing the significance of the moment. Lena's heart beat faster, but she felt no fear, only a quiet confidence. She had faced challenges before and had transformed potential embarrassment into moments of triumph. Tonight would be no exception. "Would you play for us tonight?" he asked, his voice carrying a slight challenge. Lena nodded, her fingers brushing over the tray she carried. "Yes," she said simply, her voice calm, steady, and clear. The guests leaned forward in their seats, eager to see what would happen next. Lena placed the tray down and walked to the piano, feeling the familiar texture of the keys beneath her fingertips. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself, drawing strength from the music she loved so dearly. As she began to play, the room fell into a hushed silence. The melody started softly, delicate and tender, gradually building into a rich, complex arrangement that captured the attention of every guest. Lena poured herself into the music, her fingers moving with precision and emotion. Each note carried depth, each chord conveyed feeling, and the guests were drawn into a world that transcended the restaurant, the food, and even the social hierarchy. The piano had become a bridge between hearts, connecting everyone through the beauty of sound and expression. The man who had tried to humiliate her watched closely, his usual arrogance replaced by astonishment and respect. His companions were equally captivated, leaning forward, unable to hide their admiration. Lena played with a passion and confidence that seemed to fill the entire room, each note resonating with authenticity and courage. She had become more than a waitress. She was a storyteller, sharing her heart and soul through her music. Midway through the piece, Lena added subtle embellishments, complex sequences that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth. The room held its collective breath, completely absorbed in the performance. The guests' reactions were visible and heartfelt. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the sincerity of the music, while others smiled softly, touched by the beauty and expression of her performance. Even the man who had initially sought to belittle her seemed transformed. His gaze softened, showing genuine admiration and perhaps even a hint of humility. As the final notes lingered, the room remained silent for a heartbeat, as if savoring the last echoes of her performance. Then applause erupted, enthusiastic, heartfelt, and unrestrained. Guests stood to show their appreciation, clapping and cheering, some even offering verbal praise. Unable to contain their amazement, Lena took a small bow, a shy smile on her face, but inside she felt a surge of pride, fulfillment, and joy. She had faced the challenge, expressed herself fully, and created a moment that no one in the room would forget. Returning to her duties, Lena moved through the restaurant with a quiet sense of accomplishment. She refilled glasses, cleared plates, and ensured guests were comfortable, all while carrying the inner glow of triumph. The staff whispered among themselves, sharing smiles and congratulations, silently celebrating her success alongside her. The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted, now filled with the lingering magic of music, talent, and genuine admiration. Throughout the evening, guests approached her with compliments, curiosity, and admiration. Some asked when she might perform again, others praised the depth, emotion, and skill of her playing. Lena responded politely, grateful for their kind words, but she also felt a deeper satisfaction. She had shared her music, touched hearts, and reminded herself of the power of courage and authenticity. Her talent had become more than a private joy. It was now a bridge to inspire, uplift, and connect with others. After the guests had left and the restaurant had quieted down, Lena sat for a moment by the piano, resting her hands lightly on the keys. She reflected on the journey she had undertaken, from being a quiet, unnoticed waitress to someone whose talent and courage had captivated every person in the room. The piano had witnessed her growth, her challenges, and her triumphs. It had become a symbol of her strength, her voice, and her ability to rise above doubt and fear. Locking up the restaurant later that night, Lena walked through the quiet streets, the cool evening air refreshing and calm. She felt a sense of possibility and anticipation for the future. Her music was no longer confined to her private world. It had reached out, touched others, and created meaningful connections. She thought about the man, the guests, and the ways in which people's assumptions could be overturned by talent. Courage and authenticity dot as she lay in bed that night. Lena's mind replayed the melodies she had played, the emotions she had shared, and the reactions of those who had witnessed her performances. She realized that her journey was only beginning, that there would be more challenges, more opportunities, and more moments to express herself fully through music. The piano, once a silent presence in the corner of the restaurant, had become a companion, a channel for her voice and her courage. And as sleep claimed her, she dreamed not just of music, but of the endless possibilities, confidence, and quiet power that came from embracing her true self and sharing it with the world.